If you have suffered a running related hip injury or are experiencing hip pain when you run, your running shoes could be repressing the types of sensory feedback inputs at the feet that are very essential in triggering and activating certain reflexes that lead to more optimally aligned legs during running. What I mean by that is studies are offering very intriguing clues about how the plantar meaning foot, about how plantar sensory input repression due to wearing thickly cushioned running shoes may actually be one of the root causes of running related hip injury, because the sensory input repression may impede or obstruct safe, cost effective positional alignment of the leg during certain phases of running gait, resulting in too much high levels of torque on the hip joint and elsewhere on the leg. However, the distinct sensory processing power involved in barefoot running may easily promote the mechanical building blocks for sturdier, more organized positional alignments of the leg, potentially helping to shut down excessive load accumulation on the hip joint, and therefore running barefoot may actually aid in the prevention of hip injuries. Evidence is growing that running barefoot may be a beacon of mechanical hope, because running barefoot instantly activates a wide-ranging spectrum of motor nerves and reflexes that may actually lead to more positive reinforcements in movement control as well as positional effectiveness of the leg. Now, from this, running without shoes may greatly assist in helping to tear clumsy mechanical recklessness, potentially resulting in less mechanical stress and strain on the hips. And we are now seeing a growing trend that the data regarding the positive effects of barefoot running has on overall biomechanics supports the anecdotes. Now, in contrast, many runners intuitively think that thick shoe cushioning means more impact protection, but after looking around in the scientific literature, this long held belief is actually shaping up to be somewhat untrue, because research shows that increased underfoot cushioning and protection is strongly associated with increased mechanical recklessness and greater impact production during running, which sadly, this concerning issue seems to always remain below the radar in running magazines like Runner's World, for obvious corporatist reasons, of course, but that's a whole other video for next time. More on why thick cushion running shoes may not really be part of the injury prevention solution is that in terms of running related hip injury, traditional cushioned running shoes may perpetuate the risk factors for running related hip injuries. These risk factors are well known to be excessive hip adduction and excessive hip internal rotation during the touchdown phase of running as well as the early stance phase of running, which, put more simply, means that the thigh and the knee joint point excessively inward instead of pointing more straight in the direction you are running in. Excessive hip adduction and excessive hip internal rotation looks like this. Now, why would this kind of positional alignment of the thigh and the knee joint hurt the hips during running? Research suggests that excessive hip adduction and excessive internal rotation at touchdown and during the early stance phase of running may generate a hefty dose of grinding torque on the hip joint, which will certainly compound itself more quickly at faster running speeds and at higher running volumes. Now, many runners would say wear thicker cushion running shoes and that will help take care of the problem, but by very large estimates, thick cushion running shoes have been really pinpointed as being the key driver of these kinds of mechanical imbalances, potentially pulling you in the opposite direction in reducing harmful impact on the hips, whereby traditional running shoes may be the blame for weakening your chances of upholding tension easing leg alignment favorable to reducing impact shock on the hip joint during running, and that running barefoot may be a more credible alternative in putting your hip joint mechanics on a much more secured alignment path by making your leg reflexes as effective as possible at helping iron out kinks in leg alignment and leg swing mechanics. Evidence in support of this comes from a 2010 study published in the journal Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise, which found that running barefoot engaged the hips way differently than running in traditional cushion thick running shoes, whereby these differences pertaining to barefoot running translated into significantly less impact loading rates on the hip joint. Now, the researchers found that the runners who always ran in thickly cushioned traditional conventional running shoes, also referred to as habitually shod runners, who were heel strike runners, when these runners ran barefoot, they automatically adopted a forefoot strike landing pattern, and they also showed stark reductions in excessive hip adduction and excessive hip internal rotation at initial contact, which meant these runners had their thighs and knees pointed more straight in the direction they were running in when they ran barefoot, suggesting that the sensory richness flowing in the bottom of the bare foot during barefoot running may be necessary for putting safer limits on leg misalignment and may spur positive changes in hip mechanics that may permit less tension compression loads generated on the hip joint. The researchers also found that during the stance phase of barefoot running, excessive hip adduction and excessive hip internal rotation remained significantly lower when compared to running in traditional cushion thick motion control supportive running shoes, which suggests that running barefoot may help sustain a more concentrated engagement of key reflexes and motor nerves involved in pulling the strings attached to better aligned legs and more stable hip mechanics, which may all add up to diminished impact loads on the hip joint and may help put you on a more secured path forward. This is how running barefoot may help give you the kind of outcome you are seeking with respects to improving hip and leg swing mechanics. Similar lines of research, such as a 2009 study published in the journal PMR, also found that barefoot runners showed a 54% reduction in hip internal rotation torque, suggesting that the sensory energy passing through the bare foot to the spinal cord and up to the brain during barefoot running can be converted into something very, very productive in ways that may make you more prone to making positive mechanical modifications and adjustments that may ease mechanical burdens on the hip joint, and therefore running barefoot could be a good place to start with regards to improving hip mechanics. What this research implies is that there may be a very strong sensory dimension in helping get your lower body reflexes more involved in making the biggest differences in helping you build more sustainable biomechanical changes that may make running much safer on the hips. It may take the sensory resources barefoot running provides to enable you to use your hip and leg swing mechanics as efficiently as possible in leading to more effective mechanical actions and outcomes that may lead to so little impact and torque that it may do no harm to the hips. These findings also support the research showing that exposure of the barefoot to the ground, especially during barefoot running, may provide a better way for the motor nerves that line the bottom of the bare foot to communicate with the motor nerves in the knees, in the hips, in the spinal cord, and in the motor cortex of the brain, which in turn may play into the equation of promoting certain motor nerves and reflexes that effectively help guide the legs to properly realign on a safer trajectory, potentially helping shift harmful impact loads away from the hips. It's this automatic activation of certain reflexes in the leg during barefoot running is what really matters in helping to prevent clumsy, inefficient mechanical strides, thus potentially making barefoot running a more ergonomically friendly way to run, especially on the hips, in ways where the hips are fronting much less mechanical burdens as compared to running in traditional cushioned running shoes, where in thick traditional cushion running shoes, there's that significant diminished sensory and reflexive engagement, which can be a huge part of the problem at helping resolve disorganized mechanical alignments that fuel ongoing grinding hip pain problems. So always remember that running barefoot really does help enforce the changes necessary in making your leg swing and foot strike mechanics more effective. And I always love to underscore that where we have seen where barefoot running has produced big results is looking at how most East African distance runners, professional runners run. Much of their running began barefoot, which I think helped set themselves up to be more efficient shod runners. But that's just my thoughts on that. And this is why through barefoot running, you might be able to get more done at improving your biomechanics for when you do run in shoes. This is why I think it's incredibly valuable to make sure barefoot running has a seat at the table in your efforts to helping improve your overall running technique, especially your leg swing mechanics. I posted a link to the blog post version of this video, which is linked down below in the description box if you want to check that out. For more on the health and performance benefits of barefoot running and minimalist running, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Have fun out there on the roads and trails. Bye for now.